Hello, and welcome to Sarah's Writing Spot. I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be talking about 5 simple steps that you can use the next time you are teaching your students how to write a 5-paragraph essay. So let's get started. All right, so what is a 5-paragraph essay? Well, obviously it is an essay, and it's an essay that has 5 paragraphs. So we all know that part. Now, the paragraphs in a paragraph essay, however, are very specific. So the top paragraph is always the introduction. The 3 middle paragraphs are called the body paragraphs, and they are dictated by the thesis sentence, which is in the introduction. We'll talk more about that later. And lastly, you have a closing at the very end. So if you teach the hamburger model in your classroom, the introduction and closing are like the top and bottom bun of a hamburger. And then the 3 body paragraphs are the juicy, yummy details in the middle. Now, what types of 5-paragraph essays are there? Well, let's back up and first talk about how essays generally fall into 2 categories. Most curriculums have you teach either a narrative essay or a 5-paragraph essay. Now, narratives are completely different than 5-paragraph essays. I don't recommend trying to squeeze a narrative story into 5 neat paragraphs. Trust me, I have tried it when I started teaching it. I like structure. I'm type A. I like the structure of a 5-paragraph essay, and I tried to get students to squeeze their narrative stories into 5 paragraphs. It was not their best quality work. You can do it that way, but like I said, it's not their best work. So I don't recommend that. That is for another day for us to talk about narrative writing. So as for today, most curriculums generally have 4 different types of 5-paragraph essays. So you have the persuasive essay, which is when you're trying to persuade someone to believe like you do, and you have 3 reasons to support your claim. You have the descriptive essay, where you're describing something. In this example, I was describing the season of fall, and I described the sights, smells, and tastes of fall. The next one is literary, and that has to do with a text, and that is generally a student identifying the theme of the story or a theme, and then finding 3 places in the story to support that theme. And then informational is like research. That's if a student goes out and researches a topic. Usually they're writing about 3 subtopics about that topic. For instance, if my students research an animal, they might research the features, habitat, and eating habits of that animal. Now for breaking it into the steps. Where do you start? So step 1 is to first have your students group their ideas into 3 categories. This is so important. If your students cannot separate their ideas into 3 categories, they're going to have a really hard time writing a thesis sentence, because that thesis sentence has those 3 subtopics in it. So in this example, this is an organizer for like a persuasive essay, for example. So I'm going to make a really simple example. So if the student's claim was soccer is the best sport, then you would have 3 reasons for why soccer is the best sport. So one reason might be that it's a team sport. And so 1 paragraph is going to be all about how soccer is a team sport. A second reason might be that it's easy to learn to play. You can learn when you're even 2 years old. So then you would have lots of paragraph and lots of reasons for that one. So I really recommend sticking to this step. Otherwise, like I said, your students are really going to struggle to come up with step number 2, which is writing a very clear thesis statement. So I have 2 examples here. The first one is axolotls have unique features, habitat, and eating habits. So notice that when my students write a thesis for 5 paragraphs, I always have them keep it to 1 sentence. It just is easier that way. It can get complicated if you do more than that. So I suggest one sentence, and that one sentence should have the 3 subtopics in it. So in this first example, our reader knows that the first body paragraph will be about unique features. The second body paragraph will be about the axolotl's habitat. And the third body paragraph will be about an axolotl's eating habits. So it's very clear. This is kind of like the roadmap for what the rest of the essay will be about. So then I have another example. Having a class pet fosters classroom community, responsibility, and appropriate animal care. So I want you to think about it. What will the first body paragraph be about? That's right. It'll be about classroom community. What will the second body paragraph be about? That's right, responsibility. And the third one will be about appropriate animal care. So see what I mean about being very organized. The type A part of me loves the organization of a 5-paragraph essay and actually makes it a lot easier to write. All right. Step 3, then you get to jump into your rough draft. So I suggest modeling each step with your students. I suggest taking one class period and doing the introduction. I want you to show an example of an introduction. Then you can model writing your own introduction, break it down, point out that a good introduction has a hook, has a main idea in it, and has a thesis sentence. Those are 3 big things. That's going to take a whole lesson to cover those topics. So don't rush it. So after you've shown an example and you've modeled it, then give students a chance to write their introduction. That's one lesson. Next day, teach the body paragraph number 1. Model for the students with your example how to go back to your thesis sentence, identify what was the first topic in your thesis sentence, and that's what your body paragraph number 1 will be about. So after you model it, then your students do it. Don't forget to let them share at the end of the lesson too. Let students, as long as you have time, share examples. And when they share their example, highlight what they did right. Kids will love to hear what they did right, and then they'll do it again. Okay? And so go through that. So in this example, when I teach a 5-paragraph essay, the first time we do it, it's going to take me 5 days to go through all 5 paragraphs. And that's okay. It's better to take the time to model so students can see an example so that they know they're doing it right. You're going to get better quality work that way. All right. Step 4 is revising and editing. So keep in mind, when you did your rough draft, I don't want you to worry about grammar and spelling and all of that during the rough draft. That's just the rough draft. Kids can make mistakes. I'm more interested in their ideas at that point. So here for step 4, then you get to go back and revise and edit. Now, as a teacher, you don't have time to go back and correct everybody's tiny little mistake, right? So I suggest making a checklist for revising and a checklist for editing. Now, I like to separate these two because I want students to see that these two processes are very different. Revising is making sure you've got all the parts that you need, making sure you have sentence variety. Do you have a hook? Did you put a question in your essay to make it interesting? So those are just, do you have the basic components of your essay? That's what revising is. Editing, on the other hand, that's just polishing up the spelling, capitalization. Did you indent? Did you underline the title? That's just polishing it up. If your students are typing it, a lot of those things get taken care of anyway if they're typing it and have Grammarly or other autocorrects on the computer. So I like to separate the two just so students can see that those two processes are different, but they're both important. And lastly, I like my students to type the final draft. It just depends on what your students are like. It's fine to handwrite it, but it's also a lot of fun. The kids, by the time they're in 4th grade, they really like the look of a typed final draft. They can also have fun with the color and the font and add images. It just looks professional and a nice way to present it. But if you prefer your students to handwrite, there is nothing wrong with that. Sometimes they just aren't ready, and that's okay. So thank you for joining me today. I'm so glad that you could be here with me, and I really hope that you've learned a few essay writing steps that can help you when you are teaching in the classroom. Also, don't forget, if you would like examples of 5-paragraph essays already made for you, I do sell some in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. So if you want to go check that out, go check that out. It's already done for you, and you've got them right and ready. All right. You guys have a great day, and I can't wait to see you next time. Happy writing.